The sky over Arvalis turned red without warning. Massive ships pierced through the clouds, their engines roaring like 1,000 angry beasts. On the edge of the capital, alarms screamed and citizens scattered like birds. For centuries, Arvalians had lived in peace, their old wars forgotten, their warriors turned into farmers. But peace never lasts forever. Captain Solon stood atop the hill outside the city. She was calm even when her people panicked. She had seen things before: pirate attacks, border skirmishes, even civil unrest. But nothing like this. These ships were not pirates. They were organized. They were here for war. As the first wave of bombs dropped, the city's shields barely held. Solon's command center shook under the force. Reports came in from every direction. Civilian districts hit, defense towers offline, enemy troops on the ground. Solon clenched her fists and shouted orders. She would not let Arvalis fall. Meanwhile, far from the chaos in the outer mining belt, a strange ship drifted quietly near the asteroid ring. Inside it sat a lone human, eyes scanning old star charts and listening to outdated music. His name was Cade. He wasn't a soldier or a leader. He just liked to be left alone. But fate had a way of changing plans. When Cade picked up the distress signal from Arvalis, he frowned. He knew the planet. He had traded there once. They were proud people, not used to asking for help. Hearing their panic made him uneasy. He leaned back, thought for a moment, and then stood up. With a deep breath, he said 2 words to no one in particular. Not today. Back on Arvalis, the skies were darker now. Smoke filled the air. Solon's command center had been hit. She was bleeding from her shoulder, but she refused to sit down. She kept barking orders, guiding her troops, saving civilians. Still, the enemy kept coming. Their weapons were advanced, their tactics brutal. The enemy wasn't just here to conquer. They were here to erase. Cade's ship entered orbit silently. No one noticed him arrive. He bypassed the planetary blockade using old smuggler's tricks. He landed in a burned-out zone, far from the main fighting. He stepped out wearing light armor, holding nothing but an old plasma staff and a scanner. To anyone else, he looked like a scavenger. To Solon, when she finally saw him later that day, he looked like a joke. "You came here alone?" she asked, raising one blood-covered brow. "Yeah," he replied. "I do that sometimes." She laughed out loud, even or her pride was sharp. "Let me guess," she said. "You think you're our soulmate? Our hero from the stars?" He looked at her quietly, then he said, "No, I just hate bullies." That answer surprised her. For the first time that day, she didn't know what to say. Solon had fought beside many warriors. She had seen glory, betrayal, fear. But this human, with his soft voice and steady gaze, was something else. She didn't believe in fate. She didn't believe in love. And she definitely didn't believe in soulmates. But as he walked into battle without fear, and as strange energy lit his staff, something inside her stirred. It wasn't belief, it wasn't magic, but it was something. Something that made her wonder why her chest felt warm when he stood close. Something that made her eyes follow his every step. Something that made her forget, just for a second, the war exploding around them, and that was the beginning of a war unlike any she had ever known. The battlefield was broken and loud. Smoke curled around the ruins of fallen towers. Blaster fire lit the air like lightning, and screams echoed through burning streets. Solon stood at the front lines with her troops, trying to hold what was left of the East Gate. Her body was sore, her eyes burned, but her spirit stayed sharp. Beside her, the strange human named Cade checked his staff. The weapon looked old, but it hummed with energy that didn't match its age. He didn't speak much, he didn't ask questions, he just stood, calm as stone, waiting for the next wave of enemies. Solon glanced at him and scoffed. "You really plan to fight with that stick?" "It's worked before," he said. She shook her head. "I've seen 100 brave fools. Most don't last past the first charge." Cade didn't argue. Instead, he walked forward as the enemy came in view. Dozens of soldiers in dark armor moved like machines, their rifles raised and ready. The ground shook with their march. The sky flashed with incoming fire. Solon raised her weapon and prepared to fight. But before she could fire, Cade sprinted ahead. She shouted, "Are you insane?" But the human didn't stop. The enemy saw him and fired. But something strange happened. A shield, almost invisible, shimmered around him. The blasts bounced off like pebbles against glass. He moved like he had trained all his life, each step calculated and sure. When he reached the front line, he swung his staff with such force it cracked the enemy's front unit in half. Solon stood frozen. She had never seen movement like that, not from a human, not from anyone. Cade's strikes were clean, fast, and deadly. His staff sent waves of energy with each hit, throwing armored enemies through the air. Their lines broke in seconds. Some tried to run, others dropped their weapons. The rest fell before they could even react. Solon ran forward to join him. She cut down 2 enemies and covered his side. For a few minutes they fought together like they had trained for years. She covered his blind spots. He shielded her from heavy fire. It was natural, like breathing. When the dust finally settled, the east gate was safe again. Bodies of the invaders lay scattered across the broken ground. Solon leaned against a cracked pillar, panting. Cade walked over, untouched. Not a single burn on his armor. She looked up at him. "Who are you?" He just smiled. "Nobody." Solon didn't believe him. She had seen warriors. This was not a merchant or a traveler. This was someone trained for chaos. But he didn't carry the pride of a soldier. He didn't celebrate. He didn't shout. He just sat down beside her and opened a small metal can, offering her water. She took it without a word. For a while they sat in silence, watching the smoke rise from the city. Around them, survivors moved to rebuild barricades. Soldiers regrouped. Medics helped the wounded. Finally, Solon spoke. "That thing you said earlier. About hating bullies." "Yeah?" he replied. She looked at him, really looked, and said, "I've hated them my whole life too." He turned his head. Their eyes met. No jokes, no flirting. Just a moment of quiet understanding between 2 warriors from different stars. She had laughed at Soulmates once. Now she didn't laugh. She simply looked at the human beside her and felt something stir deep inside her chest. Not belief, but something close to hope. The next morning brought a strange kind of silence. After the night's battle, even the birds refused to sing. The sky was still smoky, but patches of blue peeked through. Solon stood near the edge of the ruins, watching engineers try to restart the power grid. Her armor was scratched, her shoulder still wrapped, but she stood tall. Behind her, Cade fixed a comms tower using tools that didn't look like they belonged on this planet. He didn't speak unless needed. He worked with quiet focus, as if he had rebuilt cities before. Solon turned and said, "You're not from any world in this system." "No," he answered, still twisting wires. She folded her arms. "You're not just a wanderer either." He paused. For a second she thought he might walk away. Instead, he stood up, wiped his hands, and looked her in the eyes. "I used to fight," he said, "for someone who didn't deserve it. I don't do that anymore." Solon didn't push further. She saw the weight behind his words. Sometimes, pain doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be seen. Later that day, a scout returned with news. The enemy had fallen back, but they were regrouping near the southern plains. Worse, they were building something big and strange. A tower that pulsed with red light, sucking energy from the ground. Solon gathered her best team. They needed to see it up close. Cade joined without being asked. As they traveled through the forest toward the plains, Solon noticed something unusual. Plants wilted the closer they got to the enemy's machine. Birds were gone. Even insects had vanished. The air felt wrong, like it was being squeezed by invisible hands. When they reached the ridge, they saw it. A tall black structure pulsed like a beating heart. Red veins ran from its base into the earth. Enemy soldiers moved around it like workers, in a hive. Solon raised her lens and zoomed in. "That's not just a weapon," she whispered. It's feeding off our world. Cade looked at it without blinking. That's not just their tech. That's something older. Solon turned to him. You've seen this before? He nodded. In a war I was part of. This kind of tech drains life to grow power. They're turning your planet into fuel. She clenched her fists. Then we burn it down. That night, they returned to camp. Solon met with her commanders, planned a risky strike. It had to be done fast and quiet. If they waited, the machine would grow stronger. As others argued, Cade stood near the fire, staring into the flames. Solon joined him, her voice soft. You seem far away. He looked up. Just thinking. About what? About how this world glows, he said. Even through the smoke. Even in pain. She didn't expect that answer. She studied his face. There was something calm in him, something steady. Even after all he had seen, he still saw beauty. She didn't understand it, but it warmed something inside her. She touched his hand lightly. Maybe we glow brighter together. He didn't pull away. In that quiet moment, two warriors, one born of stars, the other forged by war, shared something simple. A bond not built by fate or stories, but by fire and truth. The war wasn't over, but something had already begun. Night fell heavy over the camp. Stars blinked through the smoky sky, distant and cold. Soldiers slept in broken shelters. Machines hummed low. Solon stood beside the command table, fingers tracing the map of the southern plains. Her mind raced, her muscles tense. She had fought many battles, but this one felt different. Behind her, Cade approached without sound. He had that strange gift, moving like a ghost even in armor. He carried a small device in his hand. It glowed blue, showing a digital layout of the enemy structure. He placed it on the table without a word. Solon looked at it. You scanned the tower? While the guards changed shift, he replied. She raised an eyebrow. Alone? He gave a small shrug. It was quiet. She almost smiled. Almost. The device showed internal energy routes inside the enemy machine. A single core sat at its center, glowing like a star. It fed on the earth, draining everything. If they didn't stop it soon, the damage would spread across the whole continent. Solon called her team together. The plan was clear. A small unit would sneak in and destroy the core before dawn. It was suicide, but it was their only chance. Cade volunteered first. Solon didn't argue. She simply nodded and said, Then I go too. They moved before the sun rose. Fog hung over the plains like a blanket. The group wore dark armor and sound-masking boots. Every step was careful, every breath quiet. As they got closer, the air grew colder and the ground pulsed beneath them. Cade whispered, It's awake. Solon didn't answer. She just raised her weapon and signaled the others to split up. The outer guards were few, but the machine was protected by drones, silent, floating killers with red eyes. Cade moved ahead. When a drone neared, he tapped a button on his wrist. A pulse of energy knocked it offline before it could scream. Solon watched him work. He didn't move like a soldier trained by rules. He moved like someone who had survived things no one talked about. They reached the base of the tower. The walls pulsed slowly, like breath. Cade placed a charge near one of the vents. Solon moved around to cover him. But something was wrong. She saw movement. A figure too large to be normal. Its armor gleamed dark purple, taller than any enemy soldier they'd seen. Before she could shout, the giant struck. Solon rolled aside, just missing the blade. The others opened fire, but the creature shrugged off their shots like dust. Cade charged in without fear. His staff lit with electric fire, and when it struck, it knocked the giant back 2 steps. But 2 steps weren't enough. The monster roared and grabbed Cade by the neck, lifting him off the ground. Solon screamed and fired straight into its head. Sparks flew, but the beast didn't fall. Cade's eyes burned bright. His staff crackled. With one final surge, he jammed it into the monster's chest. Light exploded. The creature dropped him and collapsed in silence. Solon ran to him. He coughed and sat up, face pale. "You okay?" she asked. "Been worse," he said, smirking. She didn't laugh. She just grabbed his arm and pulled him up. The charges were set. The team fell back. As they reached the ridge, the tower exploded. Behind them, fire lit the sky. Red veins burned out from the ground, vanishing into ash. They had won this battle. But as the fire died, Solon looked at Cade's hand in hers. She didn't let go. The tower was gone. Its ash still floated in the wind 2 days later. But Arvalis did not celebrate. The sky had stopped bleeding, but the silence that followed was heavy. Survivors rebuilt what they could. The land was wounded. And deep underground, sensors picked up something worse. Solon sat in the command tent staring at a screen. It showed a massive storm brewing beneath the southern crust. Not weather, energy, something alive, something angry. "We didn't kill it," she whispered. Cade stood behind her, arms crossed. "No, we just made it wake up." She turned to him slowly. What was that tower really for? He walked over, tapped a few buttons, and brought up an old file. It showed ancient symbols, dark scripts, and a creature of smoke and metal. A war beast from another galaxy. A thing not built, but born from energy and war. Its name had no translation. "It feeds on life," Cade said, "and when it's strong enough, it takes form." Solon shook her head. "Why here?" He looked at her with sad eyes. "Because your planet glows." She didn't know what to say. That word again. Glow. It wasn't just light. It meant something. More when he said it. She could feel it in his voice. Later that night, Solon walked alone along the city walls. The wind was cold. She didn't wear her armor. She needed to feel the chill. It reminded her she was still alive, that there was still something to fight for. She heard footsteps behind her. Without turning, she said, "You follow quiet." Cade stopped beside her. "You think loud." She smirked. "I'm a soldier. We don't think. We fight." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's not true. You feel things, even when you pretend not to." Solon turned to him sharply. "What makes you think I feel anything?" Cade stepped closer, and his voice softened. "Because you stood in front of your people when you could have run. Because you touched my hand when no one was watching. Because you're glowing again." Her breath caught in her chest. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked. "It means," he said, "that whatever they're trying to kill here, it's not just your world. It's what makes people still believe in each other, still care, still fight. That's what they're afraid of." She looked away. "I don't believe in love stories, or fate, or destiny." "I don't either," he said. "But I believe in you." That silence between them grew thick. She didn't move. Neither did he. But something shifted. Something invisible wrapped around their moment and held it tight. And then she whispered, "What if I break?" "Then I'll hold the pieces," he said. Solon closed her eyes. She hadn't cried since she was 10. But that night, something warm built behind her eyes. Not sorrow, not fear, just something that finally broke through the wall she had spent her life building. She opened her eyes and reached out. Her hand touched his chest, and for the first time in her life she felt safe. Below them, deep underground, the energy storm grew louder. The creature that had been sleeping began to rise. The core of its power beat in time with the rhythm of the planet's heart. But up above, 2 warriors stood side by side. Not because fate demanded it, but because something real had begun, something strong enough to make her believe. The ground shook before the sun could rise. Soldiers woke in panic. Walls cracked, glass shattered. The planet groaned like something ancient was turning in its sleep. People screamed as tremors knocked over towers still under repair. Solon burst into the courtyard, barking orders, steady, even when the earth was not. From the south, a red glow split the horizon. Fire poured from the mountains, but it wasn't lava. It was something worse. Energy, raw and alive, twisted into shape. A figure rose from the molten light, taller than any creature they had seen. Its skin was metal. Its heart beat like thunder. The war beast had arrived. Solon watched from the city gate. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just a monster. It was a god of war. It had no face. Just a burning crown of light and limbs that moved like smoke and steel. As it walked, forests died beneath its steps. Rivers turned black. Cade appeared beside her, already geared up. He held something new in his hand, a device with glowing rings and old language etched deep into the sides. She didn't ask what it was, she just nodded. "We can't beat it in open war," he said. "No," Solon replied, "but we can guide it." He smiled. "Toward the trap?" She turned to her soldiers. "Toward the ending it deserves." The command center buzzed as messages flew between squads. Civilians were moved to bunkers. Artillery was placed in key corners of the broken city. But none of it was meant to kill the beast. It was only meant to slow it down. Solon's plan was clear. They had found an old crater, a deep wound in the land. If they could lure the beast into it, Cade's device could be detonated. It wouldn't destroy the monster forever, but it would seal it for generations. That was enough. The sky darkened as the beast reached the city walls. It roared, not a sound, but a pressure wave. Soldiers fell to their knees. Minds shook. Ears bled. Cade pressed a button on his wrist. Shields activated around the core command post. Only a few could stay near him. Solon was one of them. They climbed to the highest point of the ruins. From there they could be seen. Solon raised her plasma spear and fired the first shot. It struck the beast's chest and did nothing, but it got its attention. It turned. Cade tossed a beacon toward the crater's edge. Red lights blinked. The trap had begun. The war beast roared again and moved toward them, slow but unstoppable. Each step crushed history underfoot. Solon and Cade ran. They jumped from platform to broken bridge, racing along the old city's skeleton. The beast followed, its long limbs tearing through buildings. Just before the edge of the crater, they stopped. Cade looked at her. "Now!" she shouted into the comms. "All units fall back." The city lit up with signal flares. The beast moved, faster, sensing its prey. Cade dropped the device onto the ground. It whirred, locked onto the monster's energy, and began to glow. They had seconds. Solon grabbed Cade's hand and jumped. They rolled down the side of the crater as the beast stepped over the edge. The ground cracked. The device exploded. A wave of blue light swallowed the crater. The beast roared one final time, before its body broke apart into sparks and wind. The fire vanished. The sky cleared and the earth was still. Dust covered everything. The crater was quiet now, filled with the fading glow of energy that no longer moved. Pieces of the war beast floated like ash, weightless and harmless. For the first time in weeks, the planet took a breath. Solon opened, her eyes slowly. Her arm was buried under rock. Blood dripped from her forehead. Her ears rang with silence. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw him. Cade lay just a few feet away, motionless. His armor was cracked, his face pale. Solon's heart jumped in her chest. She crawled to him, pain in every move, ignoring the weight on her back. She grabbed his hand and shook him gently. "Cade," she whispered. His eyes fluttered open. A weak smile formed. "Told you, I've been worse." She let out a short laugh and rested her forehead against his. "You're insane," she said. "You glow brighter when you're mad," he replied. Solon didn't pull away. She didn't try to act strong this time. She just held him close, their breath steady and slow. Above them, the wind picked up, carrying the last sparks of the broken beast into the sky. Later, rescue teams arrived. Medics pulled them from the rubble. Soldiers stood around the crater in silence, unsure whether to cheer or cry. They had seen victory, but at a price they would never forget. Back at the city, crowds gathered. Children stared at the sky like it might crack again. Elders wept as they touched the dirt with their bare hands, thankful it still lived. Solon walked through the city slowly, her arm in a sling, Cade beside her. People bowed. She didn't tell them to stop. For once, she accepted their thanks. Cade stayed quiet. His wounds were deep, but healing. Every time someone thanked him, he looked confused, almost uncomfortable. "You saved their world," Solon said as they reached the old wall. "I didn't save it," he replied. "You did." She smiled. "We did." The nights that followed were filled with quiet work. Cities rebuilt, trees were replanted, rivers began to flow clear again. But the biggest change wasn't in the land, it was in the people. They began to hope again. One evening, Solon stood on the hill where she first saw the enemy ships. The stars above were bright now, no longer hidden by smoke. Cade joined her without a word, as he always did. She looked up. "I used to think soulmates were myths." "I know," he said. "You laughed." "I still don't believe in fate," she whispered. "That's fine," he said. "We didn't need fate. We chose this." She turned to him slowly, eyes soft. "Then let me choose you again." Cade didn't need to speak. He simply reached out and took her hand. There were no fireworks, no glowing magic, just the warmth of two hands held tight in the cooling night air. For Solon, who had spent her whole life fighting, that simple touch meant everything. It was strength. It was peace. It was home. They stood together as stars moved above and the wind whispered around them. The battle was over. The world was healing. But something new had begun. Something even stronger than war. A year passed. The scars on our valleys slowly faded. Cracked roads were rebuilt. Crops grew again where ash once ruled. Songs returned to village squares. The people of the planet smiled more, laughed more, and looked up at the stars not with fear but with wonder. Solon had changed too. She no longer walked in full armor every day. She wore simple clothing, carried no weapons unless needed. But her presence still carried strength. She was not just a soldier anymore. She had become a symbol, a leader, a guardian of a world reborn. Cade stayed. He could have left. No one would have blamed him. He had ships, maps, and places far beyond our valleys. But he chose to stay, chose to walk the fields, to teach children how to shape tools, to help rebuild walls. He smiled more, spoke more, laughed louder, and he stayed by her side. People noticed how they moved together, not as lovers born from legend, but as two souls who had earned peace through fire. Some called them soul-bound. Others whispered they were chosen by the stars. But neither of them cared for titles. One evening, a group of children asked Solon a question. "Did you really not believe in soulmates?" She smiled at them, sitting, cross-legged in the dirt. "I didn't." "What changed?" She looked at the sky for a long moment before answering. "War teaches you about pain," she said. "But peace teaches you what's worth protecting." Cade stood a few steps away, fixing a broken tool. He glanced over at her and nodded like he had heard the whole thing. Solon continued. "It wasn't fate that brought us together. It was choice. Every day we chose to fight. We chose to trust, and then, without even noticing, we began choosing each other. The children didn't understand it all, but they smiled anyway." That night, Solon and Cade returned to the hill where everything began. The stars above were endless, no warships, no threats, just calm. She turned to him. "Do you ever miss the stars?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But I found something brighter here." She raised a brow. "What's that?" He stepped closer. "You." Solon rolled her eyes, but her smile said everything. "That was cheesy. I've been saving it. They laughed together like no war had ever happened. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest. He placed his on hers. "I never believed in soulmates," she said again. "I know. But you made me glow," she whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, under the stars, above the world they saved, the glow was not just in her chest, it was in his too. It was not fire, not magic, not legend. It was love. And that was the story they chose to live. Not written in fate, but chosen, one heartbeat at a time.